Welcome everyone tonight to this continuing education event for the McMaster Faculty of Health Sciences Program for Faculty Development, or PFD as we like to call it. We're really glad that you've joined us for this evening. I'm Dr. Tara Packham, and I'm honored to serve as the host and moderator for this event, and I'm just hoping I don't have to be a mediator, just a moderator. I'm an occupational therapist by profession with over 25 years of experience in the clinical realm, and I'm currently an assistant professor at McMaster University in the School of Rehab Sciences. And so our topic tonight is social media and the healthcare professional. And I do want to start our meeting tonight with a land acknowledgement. We want to highlight that McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations, and within the lands that are protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. To say this is to acknowledge that we have a debt to those who were here before us, and to recognize our responsibility as guests to respect and to honor the intimate relationship that Indigenous peoples have to this land. Tonight, we're gathering virtually from many places across North America, and as such, we collectively represent the traditional lands of many First Peoples. So we therefore also acknowledge the role and opportunity that we are privileged to have as health professionals to advocate for reconciliation and healing for these nations. So indeed, our topic tonight is all about professionalism and the social roles and the broader societal responsibilities that we have as healthcare professionals, and how those intersect with the traditions and strictures of our professional identities. And so tonight we're excited to have this incredible team of presenters and facilitators, and I'd have to say, I added it up. They have a combined Twitter following of over 51,000 people. Who's counting? But importantly, they represent different practice spheres and different career stages. And we're really looking forward to hearing from their perspective and their wisdoms from their social media experiences across a number of different platforms. I do also want to take a moment and recognize Dr. Teresa Chan, who brought this group together and who's leading our faculty development PFD and so many new initiatives to support continuing professional development. And so if this is the first time you're joining one of our events, welcome. And we hope that you will keep coming back for more. So tonight we do have Dr. Julianna Sienna, Dr. Joel Topf, Dr. Siobhan Dessauer, and Dr. Avital O'Glasser. And as I said, Dr. Teresa Chan is our anchor in the background. So just before we get to our presenters and hopefully our provocateurs, I want to offer a couple of points of context. I'm an occupational therapist, and a lot of people think that occupational therapists only look at occupation, and often they equate that to vocation or job. And while OTs are definitely interested in what you need to do and want to do vocationally, that's often within a broader context of your daily activities. But I love this conceptualization that how limited our lens will be if we only look at vocation, at thinking about profession, or if we're only thinking about productivity rather than seeing the bigger potential of this reason for being. I won't try the Japanese word because I'm sure I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but this reason for being that we have. And that's really the sweet spot where our mission and our passion, our vocation, and our profession not only overlap, but hopefully live in a harmonious balance. And so as we talk about professionalism tonight, I'm going to ask you to consider what elements of your mission and passion are embedded in your professional identity and how you bring that with you into social media. The second point of context that I just wanted to set up is the idea that the social discourse on professionalism that was really brought to the forefront by the Med Bikini hashtag that kind of exploded on social media after the publication of this paper in the Journal of Vascular Surgery. It really resulted in a firestorm of media attention, and that highlighted not only the bias in perspective, but also the flawed research methods that were part of the paper that ultimately resulted in its retraction. But I think it really surfaced some of the ongoing challenges that we have within the health professions about the intersection of personal and professional identities. And it may have exposed some of the pervasive systemic discriminations that were being perpetuated under the guise of maintaining professional standards. And so with that as our context, I'm really pleased to hand off this evening to the first of our speakers, Dr. Julianna Sienna, who's going to address the question of if and how one can separate their personal and professional presence on social media. Dr. Julianna Sienna recently completed her radiation oncology residency training at McMaster University. She's pursuing a fellowship in pediatric central nervous system and hematologic malignancies. Dr. Sienna is currently also enrolled in the Royal College Area of Focused Competence Clinician Educator Diploma Program, and she is interested in professionalism education and near-peer professionalism and mentorship, and is the curriculum lead here at McMaster in the Postgraduate Professionalism Competencies curriculum. Welcome, Julianna.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here today. And I just have to give the caveat that I make up literally less than 400 of those Twitter followers of that 50,000. So I'm honored to be included. I just thought if people were willing, using the like kind of button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, if people participating could say whether they felt that they personally have any personal social media account that they have. Just give me a thumbs up if you would consider yourself to have a personal social media account. Looks like we're getting a few thumbs up here. Great. Looks like almost everyone thinks they have a personal social media account. And if people could, okay, looks like everyone has a personal social media account. And what about if everyone could give me a thumbs up if you would say that you have a professional social media account? I wanted to, as I said, my lens is, the caveats are I am still a learner. I'm a fellow, or I will be. I'm currently on maternity leave, but my lens really comes from my work looking at professionalism. As Dr. Pecca mentioned, I've been on a number of committees at McMaster, and I've helped develop a postgraduate professionalism curriculum. And what I find, being kind of on the side of looking at issues we run into with professionalism, is that this is an area where learners and teachers alike can get into the mud. So that's sort of my lens at looking at this and where I come from. And as another caveat, this is my number as of right now, 384 Twitter followers. So I'm certainly not a social media expert. My lens is really much more from the professionalism side. But my objective today is to talk about kind of understanding our digital footprint, talking about what's so good about playing in the mud anyways, and then helping you wade through the mud and giving you my approach or my view on it. So in terms of our digital footprint, your digital footprint is everything you do online, including those things you do actively and passively, includes websites you visit, emails you send, newspaper articles you're quoted in, your body of research, and of course your social media presence. So this is sort of my social media presence. I consider my Twitter to be a professional account, and then I have personal Instagram and Facebook page. I have, to borrow Don's word, a lurking TikTok account, and I'm not on LinkedIn, and I really consider myself a consumer on YouTube. When I think about the risks with respect to professionalism on social media, this is sort of the framework that I work within. So I think that, you have consumers and creators on social media, and depending on which platform you're on, you may be at a different point in this continuum on each platform. And while the risk is never zero, I sort of think of it that, you're, as a consumer on social media, you have a lower risk. And the more that you're a creator, the higher risk that you take on with respect to getting into trouble with professionalism. And I'm going to use the word trouble loosely, if you will. And then I think that when you think about a personal and professional social media account, again, the risk is never zero. But if you have a strictly personal or strictly professional account, I think that the risk goes down a little bit, and that where a lot of the risk lies overlap. So some of you may say, well, that seems like a lot to navigate. I'm just going to stick to kind of consumer on a personal page and just keep liking cute puppy videos, and that's about it. I don't want to worry about getting into any professionalism trouble, but there are so many opportunities and so much reward that can be taken if you take that risk. So I've just listed, some things that I have seen as rewards that I myself personally have gotten from engaging in social media. Like, for example, finding opportunities for conferences and grants, disseminating knowledge. And, what's I think is most exciting right now is seeing this learning new things and staying up to date, especially, in their current world with COVID. In my view, it pays to have a social media strategy. And my advice is to try and keep as much as you can, your personal and your professional separate. So what does that mean? my sort of view of this is that you can sort of consider four things. So if you're thinking about having a professional social media account, the first thing is who's going to see it. So what are your privacy settings? Most professional accounts will be public, and that's sort of the point, is that they're public facing, but they don't always have to be, and you don't have to accept every friend request just because you have a professional account. So that's sort of who's going to see it. And then your affiliations are important. So who do you declare to be your affiliations? Are you saying you're, for example, that I'm associated with McMaster or a particular hospital? But also consider that your affiliations also include, to some degree, the people you're friends with that you're following on those social media accounts. And a little aside about affiliations. So sometimes when you're affiliated with a specific institution, they may want you to have a bio disclaimer. Tweets are my own, retweets are not endorsements, things like that. And, I always chuckle a little bit to myself when I see these things, because on one hand, it's sort of, to me, seems obvious, like obviously the tweets are yours, you're the one making them. And the idea that that disclaimer might protect you is sort of, I think, gives people a false sense of reassurance. So while I don't think it's wrong to include a bio disclaimer, I think it's important to recognize that it doesn't give you kind of free reign to tweet or post whatever you like without consequence. And also just in terms of affiliations, to remember that as a learner, you're always affiliated with your institution to some degree. And so you may always be held accountable by that institution for your social media presence. And then looking at content. So if you have a professional account, then the content should, I think, be in line with that and reflect that. And so thinking about why you're posting, what's the point of your professional account, and helping that to guide what you put. And lastly, thinking about your interactions. So it's not just about what you put on social media, but it's about your likes, your retweets, your comments, your shares, as I said, who you're friends with, and keeping those things in mind as you navigate your Twitter presence, your Facebook presence, etc. With that said, there are always going to be trolls and people looking for Twitter fights. And my advice from my seat is not to engage with those things, that there's always two losers in a Twitter battle. And that while there is a lot of important work to be done in terms of advocating and correcting misinformation, and I think that is important, that you need to think about what your purpose for posting is, and if engaging in a Twitter fight is really going to serve that purpose. So when you're looking at a personal social media account, a lot of people do name changes, which is, I think, helpful, but again, doesn't entirely protect you. And you may have more stringent privacy settings, and it's important to review those regularly. Important to remember that while you may not explicitly state your affiliations on a personal social media account, a lot of people that you have on your personal social media may know what your affiliations are. So just because you're not declaring it publicly on a personal social media account doesn't mean that you're not still affiliated with those institutions. And then personally, I feel that on your personal social media account, the content should be whatever you want, and you should own that content. That's why you have a personal social media account. And of course, interactions should still be respectful. Just a quick aside about burner accounts. So a burner account is a social media account that someone has anonymously that they try and make completely divorced from themselves, cool chick 123, and no affiliations whatsoever. And the idea is that it provides some sense of anonymity and a lack of answering to those institutions. But just to remember, Brian Colangelo was a general manager of an NBA team who lost his job because he or his wife, depending on which news story you read, had a burner account that was discovered. And just, it is a strategy people use, but you should do so cautiously. One of the interesting areas, I think, is when sort of worlds collide. And so this screenshot on the right is all of the Facebook groups that I am in on my personal Facebook page that are specifically targeted for physicians. And most of them have like some sort of a way that you have to get into them by proving that you're a physician in some way. But that's not unique to physicians. I was able to find a bunch of groups for other healthcare providers, and this is unique. Like, I'm looking at Canadian groups right now, but I'm sure that's the case everywhere. And so, a lot of times people are using their personal Facebook accounts to engage on these pages. And I think that's also where a lot of the gray area comes into place. So, these are just some things that I saw as eyebrow raisers. I saw a post of a staff doctor, just first name, middle name, but they were disparaging, how they'd been treated at their center. And it was enough that I knew what center it was and who they were talking about. And so that sort of raises some eyebrows for me. People posting details of their financials or their breakdown of their marriage in these shared physician Facebook groups, people posting clinical questions and sometimes without, any disclaimer of this is shared with patient's permission. And I think that's really where we start to get into some tricky waters, because these groups are what is allowing us to stay up to date with each other, but we have to be careful about how the rules of confidentiality still apply, and we need to remember those things. And that's where people can sometimes get into trouble with professionalism. Briefly, I want to touch on influencer marketing, just to say that you have to consider the ethics when you're engaging in influencer marketing. Certainly no one is going to be knocking on my door to be an influencer anytime soon with my 370 followers, but it is something to consider if you're building a professional brand, because it does sort of, I believe, kind of trades on your status and the trust that exists in healthcare providers. So if you are being paid to promote something, I think there's an ethical lens there that you have to consider. Whether or not that makes you professional or unprofessional, I think everyone will have a different judgment call on, but I think it's something to spend time thinking about. So just to summarize my personal rules: assume anything on the internet is public, even if it's private, and that it will live forever. The screenshot never dies. Carefully scrutinize your privacy settings and your friends list on any social media you have, especially if you consider it to be private, and do it regularly. Be deliberate if you choose to have a professional social media account. Assume that anywhere where you do identify yourself as a profession, by your profession, to be professional, and don't assume that if you don't identify yourself as a healthcare provider that there are no professional ramifications, and align your content with your mission. Ask yourself why you're posting something in order to frame where you post it and who can see it, and own your content. So in my view, healthcare providers are allowed to have controversial opinions, to advocate, to promote things, to share memories, to, heaven forbid, wear a bikini, but you should be prepared to own your content and still maintain respectfully online when you're discussing those things. And to remember that your content is not just what you post, but also includes what you like, what you retweet, all those things, and they become part of your digital footprint. Personally, I always use the headline test for all things when I'm talking about professionalism. So if this was the headline of a newspaper, would I be worried about it? So, if that's me posting about something or anything else, that's how I kind of help gauge myself about what is or is not professional. And I recommend that you find role models on social media platforms and pay attention to what they do and what they post about and what they don't, and how they interact with people, including with people who are sort of trolling. Some of mine include Dr. Chan and Grady Doctor, and there's many others, but those are just two. And lastly, just show yourself grace. Admit when you have made a mistake and show that to others. I think cancel culture is huge right now, but knowing that it's not always going to be perfect, but being willing to admit your mistakes and trying to show that same grace to others.